Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report podcast. Today's special guest, Kieran Ball. Kieran, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I have been exploring no code, as many of my listeners know who listen to this podcast. I reached out to a previous guest, Simon Bruce. He has a fantastic product, and he and I had a fantastic conversation. I said, "Hey, man, I want to talk to more people in the no code space. Who do you know?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know this guy particularly well, but I've been following his stuff, and I would love to hear from him. That person is you." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me check him out. Let me see if he does anything in the no code space." Your Twitter handle is at No Code Life. So I already started. I'm like, okay, well, obviously I'm onto something here. And your Twitter bio is, "I tweet about building businesses and side hustles without code." Launched, and get this, everyone who's listening, launched 17 products last year and still going. That's more than one a month. So I'm really interested and curious to talk to you today. So thanks for taking the time to connect. Out of those 17 products, what's your favorite product to talk about? We'll talk about that today. Tell me, what's your favorite product to talk about?
Well, my favorite one to talk about now is the one I'm working on currently, which is Community CoPilot. So that's a kind of micro SaaS business built I'd say built mainly without code. There is some code in the background. I have a technical co-founder. So he does the kind of data side of things and I do like the front end stuff. But yeah, I'm excited about that one because I just think it's solving a real problem and it's in like a very fast growing space. I have other products which I think are technically more challenging and more impressive, but they have zero traction. So I'm not quite as excited about those.
And when we did our pre-interview, we talked about it at one point, and you know that largely my audience is in the WordPress space. But at one point you were doing the WordPress thing. You were developing sites or designing sites with WordPress. How did that all go?
Not very well. In like 2014, the nonprofit I was working for shut down and I moved back to my hometown and I didn't want to get a regular job, so I decided to try and make it as like a freelance web designer. And I'd done a little bit of like HTML and CSS, and I'd used WordPress to build my own sites. And so I kind of had some experience of just like hacking around with WordPress templates and customizing them a bit and copying and pasting some PHP here and there. And so I started trying to do that, and I made a few websites for people, and I was always very nervous because I felt they were kind of hacky and I didn't totally understand what was going on. But, you know, some of the people who I made the sites for are still using them today, much to my horror. They haven't updated their WordPress version in maybe 6 years. But yeah, so I was doing that and I was enjoying it, but at the end of the day, working for clients and like working at the pace I was able to was too difficult, and I wasn't able to make enough. So I ended up starting a startup and finding a proper technical co-founder. So that's my day job, is like co-founder of the startup, but I don't do any kind of code or technical stuff for that. And then the no code stuff kind of came on the side as something to do as a hobby.
Am I giving WordPress too much credit to being the precursor to you, like being interested in no code and maybe getting like the HTML front end and even back end shops to inspire you to use no code today?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I used WordPress for ages and ages and I loved it. And for a long time, it was, you know, helping to scratch my creative itches. It allowed me to go beyond the kind of HTML, CSS sites that I had been doing and have proper CMSs. And, you know, I was getting to the point where I could, make decent sites that use kind of the WordPress CMS, but to put different areas of the site together and then give control to the clients. But the thing that I was never able to do, and I don't know if WordPress can do that now, is that, yes, I could give a client access to the backend CMS so that they could post their own articles or they could update the site themselves. But I could never make it so there could be multiple users coming to that site and making changes and having their own accounts. I know you can do some stuff with plugins, but I had never really dug into that. And I know you can have forums and things like that, but I'd never got that far. So when I discovered no code and realized that actually there are ways of doing that where you're not having to kind of feel like you're using a plugin and hacking something together. It's actually built to do that. I was just blown away and very excited.
Yeah. One of the things I like to explore is when I get a real diehard WordPress person on this podcast, or even somebody who's like a real diehard like open source advocate. Sort of the testament to WordPress is like, I own this code, I own the database, and really the only thing I'm quote unquote paying for is the hosting company, right? And I can move hosting companies, but that doesn't exist in its entirety, like in the no code space, in the low code space, specifically something like a Bubble or a Webflow. Sure, you can export maybe the data, but the functionality, like everything else, is the thing. That is what you're paying for. You're paying for that functionality on Webflow or Bubble. Is that something that like crosses your mind when you're building these things? And how do you make that trade-off? Like, yeah, I could own it if I just hand wrote everything or did it in WordPress, but Bubble makes me build it way faster. And I'm not really worried about the platform that it's on.
Yeah, for me, I'm not at all interested in owning it. I would rather not own it, to be honest, and have someone else handling all the difficult parts. Like with the WordPress sites that I was hosting, I was always nervous about the database, like have I done backups and what happens if it goes wrong, and there's no one to help me. So I actually quite like the fact that there is someone else taking care of all that stuff for me, so I don't have to worry about it. And yes, I am paying them a monthly fee to do that. And yes, perhaps there is some risk that if they just disappeared overnight, my site would be gone. But for me, it's more of a means to an end. So I'm interested in like the business side and can I get traction with this product? And I'm not I don't really care. I'm agnostic about what platform I'm using or what technology. And I know that if but one of them, Bubble, went under overnight, I know that I could probably rebuild the same functionality within a couple of months. So it wouldn't be a huge hit. But the fact that I can build quickly and I can pivot quickly is really where the value is for me.
Yeah. People might have heard, oh, I have a technical co-founder. I thought this no code, low code space was supposed to be super easy. I fell into that quote unquote trap when I first heard of Bubble. I was like, oh boy, I know how to build a page in WordPress. And I went into it and I was like, wait a minute, what's this blank canvas staring back at me? Like, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And there is I'll say it, a steep learning curve. You built a product specifically to address that called the Bubble Crash Course. How did you fall, into that? And did you have those same experiences? Like you open up Bubble day one and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got to learn this thing a little bit deeper than I thought.
I mean, I know most people do kind of struggle when they first start with Bubble, but I think there's some misconceptions about it, and I think once you learn a few simple kind of rules, you quickly get used to it, and then you can start building stuff yourself. So you definitely don't need a technical background. You don't need a technical co-founder. It helps to understand some logic about databases and things like that. But if you've used like spreadsheets a lot, then you'll probably have a good understanding of that anyway. But yeah, I just enjoyed building things on it, and I actually didn't do any tutorials myself. I just learned by building, and every time I thought of something and I just thought, I wonder how you would do that, and then I thought of a way to do it, and it just worked. So to me, it seems quite intuitive. Like Bubble seems to fit with the way that I think about doing things, and so it comes quite naturally, which is just a wonderful feeling. But I realized that it wasn't like that for everyone. So me and a buddy who we were both kind of relatively recent beginners of Bubble, we decided to make a course for beginners to explain in the way that we would have wanted to understand or hear from someone else when we first started. So it takes you from nothing to, by the end of it, I'd say you could build almost anything you want. Maybe not a marketplace website, because that has quite a lot of extra complexities when you have two parties paying each other. But you could definitely build a SaaS. You could definitely build like a directory site or a job board or anything like that.
I even hate to admit this, but I when I first dove in, I started taking a bunch of they have a really good like onboarding, or at least when I did it, which was probably over a year ago at this point, because I think it was pre-COVID. They have a really good onboarding like tutorial, like you kind of walks you through all these different systems and stuff like that. Are there like at this point like templates where you can just spin up, maybe not a marketplace site, but like are there templates for complete apps that you can just turn on in Bubble? Is that something that exists?
Yeah. One of the best things about Bubble actually is that they have tons of plugins and they have tons of templates. So there are marketplace templates, and you can just choose one, and you have it's almost a fully functional marketplace straight out of the box. You need to like plug in maybe your Stripe API keys and things like that, and it will just work. And then it's all about, because it's going to be a fairly complex template. When you come to change things, you need to actually understand. So I wouldn't recommend just diving in there with a really complicated template. Personally, I like to start from scratch every time, just so I totally understand how everything works and there's not parts that I'm wondering, what they are. And the plugin marketplace on Bubble is just incredible. Like you can just extend Bubble in any way you want. Any technologies you can think of that it's not using, you can have someone build a custom plugin. And so instead of hiring a developer to build the whole thing, you just hire them to build this plugin, and it takes them like 5 hours, and you pay them accordingly. And then it's your plugin, and you can use that again and again on all your projects. So that's what I did for one of my projects, which I think is the most technically accomplished one. It's a site called Review, usereview.com. And it essentially means anyone can upload a video to the platform, and then I can see it on my dashboard and I can watch it back. And as I'm watching it, I can type comments, and they will be time tagged to the moment that I'm typing them in the video. But I can also record video comments. So if you think of someone perhaps learning a language, or someone who's given a speech and you wanted to give feedback to them, they can watch it back, and they can have all these comments from all different people and video comments and everything telling them how they could improve on it. And that's all built with Bubble and with like 2 custom plugins, which, as I said, just took a few hours for someone to build.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. How did you find yourself, at least in this new venture, with I have loads of questions, and I'm trying to think of the best way to frame this. But with this new community CoPilot project, you have a technical co-founder. Now, I get the reasons why, right? Scalability. I mean, you can't do everything. You're probably doing things like the marketing, the business side, the growth side, all of that fun stuff, and you have someone technical running it. How did you come across getting somebody to be? Well, how did you come across getting your co-founder is the more direct question for this project.
Well, so I've done like all of the front end of the website and a lot of the operational stuff. So the website itself, the app, is pretty much all built with no code. And you could build it without a technical co-founder. But the side that he's doing it, so Community Copilot it's like a CRM and analytics tool for community managers. So if you run a community on Slack, which I actually do, then you can just plug it into your Slack. It will pull in analytics. You can see which members are active and which aren't, and you can keep notes on them. You can send messages to them and all that through the platform, and just keep track of who everyone is. I actually met Kevin, my co-founder, through the community that I run. So he was in the community, and I was saying, "Oh man, it's really hard to keep track of all these new members." And he said, why don't we team up on something? And so he's doing all like the data side. So all the data that comes out of Slack, he's grabbing out of Slack in Python, he's putting it into a Hasura database, and he's doing some like clever sums on it, and then he's pushing that into Bubble. So we're using that because we think it's more scalable than using the Bubble database, purely because of the volume of information. We have one community that's using it that has 13,000 members. So if you think of all the data that's going to come out of that Slack group every day, we need to be able to kind of store that in a scalable way. So we're a pretty good team, and he's given me the confidence, I think, because I think as a no coder, when you are trying to build a SaaS and you're essentially a technical founder, but then you don't really, there's parts of it that you don't totally understand. It's very reassuring to have someone who knows code, who can like look in the logs and understand things better than I can.
Yeah. How, how do you think about scaling, let's say, a digital product company or a product? Like you have Bubble Crash Course, right? And that probably takes, the investment of, just keeping up with maybe major features with Bubble, and you're going back maybe every quarter or maybe every 6 months, maybe even only a year. I mean, I know people who sell products who don't touch it. They don't need to touch it for like a couple of years, and it just sells at infinite, and they don't really need to maintain it other than marketing and promoting it. How have you found yourself balancing with all the other stuff that you've done, like digital product, sort of this one-time fee versus, well, this new SaaS business? How do you find yourself balancing that? Not even just product development, but scaling it, growing it, that kind of thing.
So it's fairly new. So I've actually like amongst those 17 products, or it's now more like 20 that I launched. I wanted to try a bit of everything, and so I have done a podcast, newsletter, various SaaS businesses, and that all failed, or I gave up on eventually. And then I did Launch MBA, which is the community, and so that's a paid community, and that's actually in terms of revenue, that's my most successful no code business so far. But there's not a whole load of no code in there. It's mainly a community, and so there's a lot of more kind of people skills. I wanted to do a digital product or an information product because I saw a lot of people were doing them, and I thought, it just seems like something where you put in the effort up front, but then you can earn revenues from it without really doing any extra work, apart from some marketing, over, potentially a year or two. So I wanted to see what that was like. And I figured, what have I got to teach? Well, a lot more people now are becoming interested in Bubble. So it just seemed natural to try and do that. And also I had, people on Twitter kind of know me for the stuff I build with Bubble. So I was getting a lot of questions about it. So I thought I may as well try and make something. So it's fairly new, and I think we're not putting enough effort into marketing it as we should, because really marketing is something that you need to actually focus on. You can't expect it to just sell itself. But we are learning, and we've started a YouTube channel and stuff like that, posting tutorials and things like that. So I think the SaaS is going to take longer to build up in terms of like monthly recurring revenue. And obviously that's the dream, to have your MRR keeping you going without any additional work. But the digital product is great because it's there. And anytime I do like a promotion, I get a nice little bump in sales, or anytime someone's asking a question about Bubble, I can always mention it. And it's nice to have it there.
This is during our pre-interview, one of the notes I have, I don't know if I wrote this or if you said this, so I apologize if it was me who wrote it and not you who said it, but I have a frustrated idea person. Is that where this comes from? Like, so you say that you launch a bunch of things, and your words, you said that they failed. I feel the same way with a lot of the stuff that I do, but I really take them as deep learning lessons. Frustrated idea person. Could you just expand on that? Is that the sum of all of this stuff?
That was me before I discovered no code. That was me for years and years. While I was doing my WordPress freelancing before that, whilst I was employed for various companies, I was always trying to launch side projects and businesses, and I could never get anywhere because, I tried learning to code. I just couldn't do it. I tried hiring developers. I tried finding technical co-founders, but ultimately most of my ideas were bad. And at that point, I didn't understand anything. Like, I never validated an idea before I built it. I was still in the kind of frame of mind where I'd come up with a great idea, not even for me, not even solving any problem for me. I'd tell all my friends about it, like, until they got totally bored. And then maybe I'd try and find someone to build it for me, and it never got done. And so when I discovered no code, I started launching all these terrible ideas and making them into reality. And I just quickly discovered that actually, even though I could make decent like MVPs, like functional products now, it didn't mean people were going to use them. So I realized after doing maybe 10, 12, 15 products that actually there's no, although I was learning a lot and it was a great experience, it wasn't really going to go anywhere unless I changed the way I thought about things. So I really started to focus more on just launching landing pages and trying to get people to pre-purchase products, because I think the ultimate validation you can get is if someone's willing to pay for a product that doesn't yet exist. And so for Bubble Crash Course, for Community CoPilot, and for Launch MBA, my community, I pre-sold all of those. And having some money down from people just gave me the confidence that people wanted it. And it also kind of lit a fire under me to say, like, people want to give you money for this. You have to make it good. Like, there's no choice. Whereas if I'd have done, if I'd have tried to put in all the, 100 hours of recording tutorials for Bubble Crash Course, not knowing if anyone was going to pay for it, I think I probably halfway through, I would have been incredibly depressed and probably just given up. I would have thought of 1,000 excuses not to launch it. But because we had, before launch, we had like $6,000 committed already, which we figured pretty much covered the cost of our time. We were just really motivated to get it done and get it out there.
Yeah. Do you have a better sense? I know this is probably a difficult question to answer, but it's one that I struggle with my own works. I like to call them works of art now. Makes me feel a little bit better. Like all that time that I've wasted is at least some value. Do you have a sense of like that time length or timeline that you'll commit to a product or an idea before you've realized, you know what, I don't even think this is going to work? Even if it is, I have to get to the landing page and I have to pre-sell it, because sometimes it's very difficult to peel back from yourself and like look at the scope of work that you're doing outside of your body and be like, okay, you have to stop being motivated about this idea because it's not going to work. Do you have a sense of when you can find that clarity in a project these days?
I mean, it's definitely helped me to launch so many things, because the more things I launch and the quicker I launch, the more easy it is for me to give them up. And, that's not always a good thing, because there may be some great ideas in there or great products that I just haven't put the right amount of effort into to getting them out there. Some of them, I just tweet it once, and if it doesn't get a response, then I just forget about it and move on. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's good to have this kind of lack of emotional attachment to your ideas, because ultimately, everyone has tons of ideas, and really by putting lots of stuff out there, you start to understand what it feels like when something has traction. Like, you can put 5 or 6 things out and you're like, oh, I think some people seem to like that. Like, I had 10 signups, but then when you put one out there and suddenly everyone's like talking about it, and you've got like 100 signups and some people are saying, can I pay for this? Then you're like, oh, right. Okay. This is what it's supposed to feel like. So then you can kind of feel this pull of demand from people, and that tells you when you should keep going. But I have had, I have products like the one I mentioned, Review, where I still think it's a great product, and in the right market and the right niche, it could be really, really useful for people. So that's just still kind of there in the background. And occasionally, if I'm talking to someone and I think, oh, this might be interesting, then I'll mention it to them. And it could be that just by having it there, someone will discover it, and then I'll discover a whole market that actually really wants this tool.
Yeah. And at some point you might even, you might just become like really successful with Community CoPilot, let's say, and that really starts to take off. And then maybe you can, again, my words, not yours, but redirect some resources into your other products and maybe put a marketer person on it or put a developer on it to enhance it. Is that something that sort of rattles around the old brain, that maybe you'll do that in the future instead of just letting it sit, using that cognitive weight on your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I grow as a person, I learn more and more every day about marketing and, what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. So then when I'm kind of feeling stuck on one project, I can go back to an older project and think, well, how can I apply what I know now that I didn't know when I built this to this project? Can I clean up the landing page? Can I completely change the value proposition? And can I send it out and do some more marketing on it and just give it a push? And I quite like that, because I think I think a lot of products take time to kind of percolate and find their own space. So it's good that you can kind of be patient and just have all these projects hanging around in the background. Although I am, paying monthly for a lot of these things, but I figure it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, at some point your accountant's going to be like, "Well, what are you doing here? Are you going to, sell this off or let it die?" Two questions. I see a lot of people now that I'm diving into the no code space a lot more and sort of just observing sort of a community of folks that I don't know really well. I know the WordPress and I know some of like the Bootstrap SaaS community fairly well. There's this tug of war of whether or not to start a personal brand, build an audience, and then launch products. Am I getting this right that you were sort of building products first, accruing an audience over time? But I don't really see, KieranBall.com podcast or Kieran's Thoughts, podcast. Is there something like that brewing in the background? Or do you say, no, I kind of like the methodology that I've approached this with so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting discussion, like whether you should build an audience first. So I am kind of consciously trying to build an audience under the kind of no code life brand, although my website is awful and I need to update it. But that's kind of a side effect of just the fact that I really enjoy building and I enjoyed just talking about it. And so I hadn't actually used Twitter at all really until I discovered no code. And so that's why I started this whole new handle and just started tweeting about no code. And I found that like the audience, because no code is a growing space and it's growing so fast, it's been relatively easy to kind of accrue followers on Twitter. And I say easy, but I have tweeted over 5,000 times. So there's some work that's gone into that. And sometimes I do feel like I need to like write threads and add value and all this stuff. But I think in this situation, that has fed directly into the success of Launch MBA and the success of Bubble Crash Course, because when I launched those things, I was able to just do like a couple of tweets and it got retweeted by a bunch of people. And, we got like a few $1,000s of sales on both products, got a few $1,000s of sales just from a couple of tweets when I launched it. So there's like, you kind of build up this goodwill amongst the community and then they're just happy to see you launch something. I wouldn't necessarily advise building an audience to anyone because I think you need to be certain that you're going to stick around in this space for a long time. Otherwise you could waste years building an audience and then decide you don't actually want to build any products for this audience. And then it's time wasted. So it's a kind of, you put in the work before you create the product, and you are having the risk that you may not want to actually launch or use that audience in the end. But it seems to be working well for me in the no code space, and I really like being able to like bounce ideas off of people and kind of be guided by the community. So like Bubble Crash Course, the idea came out of the fact that I was getting loads of people DMing me asking for advice on Bubble. So I was thinking, okay, people are interested, people know that I know about it, so perhaps I can, instead of just answering these questions one-on-one, perhaps I can build something that's a bit more scalable. So yeah, I think it's a tough one because a few people have asked recently, like, should they bother with building an audience? And I think, honestly, if you're the kind of person where you could put exactly the same amount of time and effort into marketing, then I think you would have just as good results in terms of revenues from marketing as you would building an audience first and then selling to that audience. But I know realistically myself, I wouldn't send out 5,000 cold emails to people. I would find it really awkward and difficult, but I'm happy to send out 5,000 tweets about stuff that I'm building and kind of build friendships that way. So for me, that feels more comfortable. And that's why I like doing it that way around.
Yeah. Yeah. One of I think a lot, and again, speaking for myself largely here, is I think when people look at doing a personal brand, they either look at it very, I don't know, like methodically or like resource intensive. And they're like, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well just spend, resources over here and just market the, the business. But also I think a lot of people associate, much like you were getting at, like if I start a personal brand and I don't see this product through, well, people are just going to think I'm one big loser, one big phony, right? And I don't think that should stop people. I'm on the sort of the other camp there, was like, I don't let that stop me, because I look at the personal brand as the sum of all parts, and not even just the product, not even just like your business, but everything that you either believe in or want to share publicly, social media, or your own blog or podcast or whatever. How does this ever play a role in your brain? Like, man, if this product doesn't make it, or I guess, how do you deal with that sort of stress? Man, if this product doesn't make it, will somebody just look at me and be like, oh, look, another failed product? I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, when I say that to you, I don't mean that in a bad way. But how do you think
No,
about that as a creator?
So I'm really into the whole fail in public kind of attitude that some people have, and I think people actually really resonate when you're vulnerable. And I know that I've tweeted publicly about several products that I shut down or that failed or where I did the wrong thing, and it always gets a really good reaction. So I actually feel completely comfortable with failing and telling people about it and analyzing it. And I think that's becoming more and more common. So I think as long as people handle it well, and you're just honest and open, I think actually to fail as many times as I have, and to be open about it, can be a huge benefit, and it can really help people to understand you. Because there's tons of people, like, you got Instagram or TikTok, and you're going to see tons of people who are pretending to be super successful and that their life is perfect all the time, and we all know that's not true. Whereas on Twitter, I feel like people can be a lot more open about things they do wrong, and they'll get support. I don't know if it's just the no code community that's like that, but I have a feeling that it's probably a lot of creative communities that are like that. So yeah, I actually like it, and I don't mind, and I feel more comfortable with failing in front of the Twitter audience than I would with my actual real life friends or family. Like, I would never
Yeah.
I would never go up to them and say, "Oh, I totally failed with this. This is what happened," because they'll be like, "Oh my god, that sounds terrible, you poor thing." Whereas in this world, it's kind of normal to do that, and I like that.
Yeah. What kind of challenges, sort of getting close to wrapping up, what kind of challenges do you think you'll face as Community CoPilot grows? And I'm going to pull out my crystal ball. I did this for a friend of mine, I think a year back or 2 years back, Paul Jarvis. He had a very big personal brand. I mean, he still largely does, but he's quite recently sort of quote unquote shut it down, so that it doesn't distract him or pull away from what he's doing. But he started a company called Fathom Analytics, and I had him on my podcast a couple times. But he launched a book. He had all these products. We were talking about this, and I was like, man, I think Fathom Analytics is going to be the game changer for you, just by the way he was talking about it, just thinking about the breadth of scale that it has. All of that is to say, is I feel like the same way from what I've heard from you about Community CoPilot, like this could be the one that really takes off, just thinking about in terms of scale. What kind of challenges are you anticipating with this, or that you're immediately having, like growing this this product, or what you might see in the future as a challenge?
I mean, I'm already discovering more competitors than I thought there were, and kind of a good thing, but also a bad thing, is that they all seem to have tons of like VC backers. So, it's me and Kevin, and we're going up against a few companies. Admittedly, there's only like 3 or 4, so it's still, considering how many Slack communities and Circle communities there are out there, it's like still really small. But it is daunting to be going up against these guys, knowing that I have a day job. I can't see that I'm going to leave my day job anytime soon. So this is going to be a part-time thing with me. So I'm certainly nervous about, like, if I get some big or high-profile communities using it and stuff goes wrong. I'm certainly nervous about like handling customer service and things like that. And managing the whole side of a business in my spare time, I think is going to be challenging. And then beyond that, I'm actually nervous about, like, how fast it's going to grow. Like, I don't want it. I'm at the stage now where I'm more interested in kind of a bootstrapped business and the whole kind of freedom side of things, I'm not really that interested in getting VC funding, or I'm not at all interested in it, to be honest, or even any kind of investment. I really like having just control over everything, because I've had invested businesses before, and I just like the idea of bootstrapping things. So I'm just wondering like what our growth is going to be like, and is there going to be a point where we need to suddenly start thinking about hiring team members and going full time, and how's that going to look, how's that going to affect my life, and how is it going to play with like the other things I'm working on. But I guess those would all be amazing problems to have, really, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question I don't often ask too many folks, but somebody asked me this on a podcast the other day. If you just had to shut the laptop down, do nothing tech, no code, no code, no designing, nothing online, what do you think that job would be for you?
Oh, I thought you were going to say hobby, so it has to be a job, so I have to get paid for
it. Yeah, you have to. You just want to totally get rid of doing tech to sustain your lifestyle.
I haven't gone a day without opening my laptop since I first got a laptop. I have no idea. I guess I do really enjoy community building, and I do actually have like a meetup group, or a couple of meetup groups in my hometown, one to like play soccer and one for like entrepreneurs. So I think I'd probably do something around like real life offline community building, and maybe just manage some meetup groups and get people to pay me for that. Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing I feel like I could do without a computer, but that would be a horrible situation.
Yeah. My answer was I just want to be a landscaper. I just want to go cut grass for people. Like I'm sick and tired of like picking colored blues for people on on a website, or can you move this over here by a pixel, or my database is running slow, or my podcast doesn't sound. Just is that the grass you want me to cut? Okay, I'll go cut that grass. That's all I'll do. Nice and easy. Well, or at least I hope.
I have no gardening skills, or I'm terrible with tools. So yeah, I don't think I could do anything like that.
Kieran Ball, you have a million products for folks to choose from. Where do you want folks to go today to check out? CommunityCoPilot.com. Where else can they go to find more about you?
So yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, it's at NoCodeLife, all one word. You can check out my community launch MBA, which is for makers who want to start launching products in the same way I have. That's launchmba.co. And the Bubble Crash Course, if you're interested in learning more about Bubble, is gum.co/Bubble Crash Course.
Everybody else is mattreport.com, mattreport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. Number one way to stay connected. Also, thewpminute.com. Check out thewpminute.com for your weekly WordPress news in under 5 minutes. All right. We'll see you in the next episode.